I used to do a lot of things the hard way. Back as a young man studying jazz guitar in college, I developed a rather unhealthy, or you say counterproductive, obsession with alternate picking. Digga, 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 digga. My heroes, Al Di Meola, John McLaughlin, Steve Morse, guys like that, could do that. And that really fascinated me, got me very excited. And a lot of jazz players, like George Benson, Pat Martino, could do that. And I assumed that they could just play anything they wanted to. So with that understanding or misunderstanding, I set out to try to practice everything I knew, every single conceivable scale that I had learned, every arpeggio, in all 12 keys, starting down, up, alternate picking, and run through everything. And then I'd start again, starting on upstroke. I mean, it was crazy. I was training like a Olympic athlete, 7 days a week. Just get up in the morning, cup of coffee, shower, just start practicing in my dorm room or in a music building practice room or something. And a lot of this time spent in the prime of my life, away from my friends, my girlfriend, and being outside and stuff, was kind of a big waste of time, unfortunately. I mean, I did learn the neck. I learned notes. I learned, scale shapes and arpeggio patterns and everything. But in terms of the technical goal of achieving that kind of picking fluidity, it didn't really happen. It was kind of disappointing. Instead, I just became chronically sore. Like an athlete who overtrains, you kind of like lose some of your chops. It was weird. And even worse than that was my feel, like my touch, which I had been so proud of as an unschooled, hard-rocking teenager, kind of became kind of stilted and stiff sounding because I was just practicing everything tick, tick, digga, 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 with a metronome, at a moderately fast tempo, say between 110, 120 beats per minute, with the hope that one day I would just wake up and just be able to just rip through everything like a chainsaw. But that, like I said, that never really happened. I became sore and just kind of achy, and I go to jam with people, and I was like, it felt kind of stiff, and I would even turn the time around sometimes. Like, the downbeats become the upbeats. Drummers would be like, whoa, what's up with this guy? It's time. So, I mean, that was kind of maddening, I was doing all this training, and it wasn't really getting anywhere. So I eventually came to the conclusion that what I was doing was I was training myself to be a beast of burden, trying to conquer the most difficult patterns on a guitar with the, expectation that I would just be able to just break loose and do that. That's how you had to do it. You just had to muscle through it. And I realized eventually that, no, actually, the trick, as it were, the key is to try to go around these obstacles. Find an easier way, take advantage of the different openings that are available on a guitar. Things that sound cool, sound impressive, but are like delightfully easier to play. So it's not so much a question of plowing through the obstacle or the mountain, but if you can find a way to go around it, be like water. Find this little cracks, like a river, like finding its way to the ocean. Takes a circuitous route sometimes. But as long as you get the sound you want, okay? So with that in mind, I'd like to show you some cheats, as they would say in the gaming world, or shortcuts that make things a little easier to alternate pick. Not necessarily easy, but easier. I've made some interesting observations, and I've discovered that a lot of it has to do with crossing strings. Like tremolo picking on one string is fairly easy. You're playing up and down one string. But when you go to cross strings, that's when it gets weird. So with that in mind, let's get started with a simple little note pattern, and I'll show you a hard way, arduous way, and then a couple easier ways, and we'll take it from there. Okay, take this pattern. That's the first 8, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the first 5 notes of a C major scale played as 16th notes, so it's like an 8-note pattern. Now, I'm using a rather compact fretboard shape, which you'd think would be the way to go, right? Always go for a compact play in position. But if you look at the pick, it has to cross strings 3 times, across the D, G, and B strings. So I'm going cross, cross, cross. So that's kind of hard to get faster at a certain point without sounding like you're struggling too much. And even if you try starting on upstroke, that's even weirder, right? You start missing notes. So I figured, why not try to consolidate the notes onto fewer strings? So just play the same notes on 2 strings, the G and B. So I'm going to move the C note here over to here. So now I'm going to go. And that's a lot easier because you only have to cross from here. That's the one cross. And I'm using what's called outside the strings picking, which you may have heard me use that term before in other lessons. It's when you have two adjacent strings, or I guess it could be a string skip as well, and you're picking a downstroke and then going to a higher string on an upstroke, or doing an upstroke and a higher string with a downstroke and a lower string. The point is the pick is being sent in the direction that it wants to go. You're not changing direction in midair, fighting inertia. So by doing that, it makes it a lot easier to pick. Right? You start on the top note. I've maximized, optimized the technique there. So even though it's a little bit more of a stretch here at the front hand, it's not too bad. And here's another way you could play it. You could finger the notes here and start on an upstroke. Now I'm going up, down. So I'm still doing outside the strings picking, which is the opposite of inside the strings picking. That's when you're going to go a lot more movement. In either case, you do have to, the pick obviously has to change direction, right? In midair. I mean, if you're just picking on one string, you're changing direction. That's the easiest thing to do because there's minimal movement involved, minimal distance, and that cuts down on your travel time, right? You look at it that way in terms of physics. So, sounds less strained, it's easier to do. So that is a good example. Now let me show you a longer example. This one is an A harmonic minor scale. Say you're going to play this run here. It's like a neoclassical type of thing. That's rather arduous, the alternate pick. I mean, you could throw in some pull-offs, maybe do a little sweep in there, but you're not going to get that same kind of sound, that digga, which is, if that's your goal. So why do that when you could alternatively go So what I did was I'm playing it on one string using finger slides with the index finger. Shift, 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 shift. And the timbre, the tone, is more consistent too, right? And to a non-guitar player, that sounds, oh, it sounds like a guy's got chops, And it's like, wow, he's a virtuoso, even though you're cheating, right? But only other guitar players would know that. So, and it looks cooler on stage, right? Flying up and down, that cascading up and down one string. So that's another example of just trying to consolidate as many notes into one string as possible. Okay, now let's look at your conventional major scale fingering. Say for a G major scale in third position, it's actually fourth position because your middle finger is at the fifth fret, and the position is really determined by the finger behind your middle finger. So if I use this standard fingering, right, nice and neat for the fret hand, right? I mean, it's great for hammering on. If you want to do that, get a legato approach, totally cool. That's just as musically valid and legitimate as picking. But it becomes a problem. Like I said, most guitar players don't even realize that when they cross strings, sometimes they're doing the inside the strings picking move. And here, if you go, start on a downstroke, you're going to go down, up. That's cool. That's outside the strings picking. But then when you do your next string cross, you're going down, up, down, up, down, up, down. You're going to encounter an inside the strings right there. That's going to slow you down a little bit in so much as it's going to make it a little more difficult. You got to put a little more effort into it. It's not too bad going up. When I say going up, I mean musically, ascending. But because you're going down to the floor, even though I mentioned that inside the strings picking, you have to overcome that inertia. Changing direction and then going over the string you just picked to the other one, you are getting an assist from gravity. Think about it. Gravity is always relentlessly pulling your hand down towards the floor. So now coming down, descending, which you're actually going up, right? You're fighting gravity, so you're going. That's where you get hung up. No fun, right? So why do that when you could alternatively use a descending fingering pattern coming down that goes. So this way, every time I cross strings, I'm going down, up, right? You want to go on an upstroke when you're going this way, right? So I did 2 notes, down, up, now 4 notes with a slide, down, up, down, up. And then 2 notes, and then 4 notes with a finger slide again. So going up, I'm going to basically stick to the original fingering with a slight alteration. I moved the G note from here over to here to set me up for this thing, so. That sounds a lot more even. It feels more relaxed, and just as importantly, it sounds less strained and more relaxed to the listener, right? You want to get that rigorous classical type of, you hear like concert pianist, that classical precision. So that's one way of doing it. If you really want to optimize every single string cross, including the ascending ones, you could use some finger slides and go diagonally this way. So if you're going to play a G major scale, you could do this. So what I did there is I did 3 notes, because that actually, down, up, down, sends you, the downstroke sends you to the A string, right? But now I'm going to go up, down, up, down. I played an extra note on the A string via the pinky slide. And then I did either 2 notes or 4 notes on the remaining strings. And I got up to the same B note without even going to the high E string. So it's. And you want to take that to an extreme. You could make it in 3 octaves by just using 4 notes on each of the middle strings. This is kind of like a Steve Howe type of thing, where you're going to fly way up and down the neck. That's actually enjoyable to do, because you're not working too hard. You still got to work, right? There's no free lunch here with the guitar playing, but look at the range. You got up to there, I think. Every single string cross is performed with outside the strings picking, which makes it easier on you. Now, the only downside of that is that you do hear an audible squeak when you shift, right? Depending on how new your strings are. A fresh set of strings will squeak more than a broken-in set of strings, right? You could maybe use flat-wound strings, as Pat Metheny had done sometimes, but most people, myself included, prefer the brighter sound of round-wound strings. It's better for rock, right? I mean, if you're just playing straight-up jazz, flat wounds will get rid of the slide, but they're not really appropriate for playing other styles of music. So, and the faster you go, the less noticeable they are, this little finger slides. Now, what's interesting about this last pattern is I took the same fretboard path going down as I did on the way up, but the finger slides were different. I slid up with the pinky, but then coming down, I'm going to slide with the index finger. So those are shift slides. Actually, I think I played 7 notes on the top string. I call that the turnaround, like a swimmer kicking off the side of the pool that's turning around. But here, I just grouped a bunch of notes. As long as you go an upstroke when you cross to the next lower string. You can take it in stages. Start out like, get your motor running, so to speak. Or just practice it in isolation. Go. Try to stay relaxed and palmate the lower strings, because you never want them ringing in the background. It just sounds like junk. It sounds like, sloppy to have the strings ringing. So even if you're not palm muting on the top strings, just palm mute them on the lower ones that you're not playing on. Now these 4 notes per string patterns are kind of out of necessity, because if you were to just try to do 2 notes per string, for the goal of avoiding squeaking of the shifts, you would kind of run out of notes because it takes your hand this way if you go. See, I was only able to go up to that note. If I started up here, that can be a little weird because you have to shift every other note, right? So it's too much shifting. Those 2 notes per string patterns actually are ideally suited for pentatonic licks. I like to call these picking cells, these 4-note patterns. Like say A minor pentatonic, you take these. That's part of this box, the top part. And then you can shift to other adjacent boxes. You can go. Right? That's kind of fun to do. I mean, a hell of a lot easier than going. That's not worth the effort, but just by going, and so I did this. I went 4 notes, shift, so I used, the 3 adjacent boxes. You got this one, and this one, and just picked whatever 4-note cells were the most convenient for my fret hand to get to in a hurry. And here our grand finale example is kind of like a roller coaster ascending run. This is based on a C major scale, and I'm going to show you how you can connect patterns by using position shifts. And I am going to throw in some inside the strings picking because, it's easier, it's manageable when you're ascending. But all my descending patterns are going to be done with outside the strings picking, and that's where you're going to see me shifting. So it goes like this. All right, so just take that one measure at a time. We start out going, but yeah, instead of going to C, we're going to go to E here. But notice the slide. And then we're going to continue up through the scale. Now you notice that I moved a note. It was a B note. I moved it over to here. And then another slide. And again, the B note, I played it here, but then played it here because it just helped out with the picking pattern. I went for the outside the strings, picking on the way down. So. So picking up from the downbeat of bar 4, we're here now. Shift. Shift. Notice I shifted, I played 4 notes with a pinky shift. 2 notes, 2 notes, 2 notes, 2 notes, and then 4 notes again with the index finger shift. And then we're gonna, bar 5, I'm still in 10th position, take this next note, shift, another shift. And that's a shift right there because my goal was to continue that kind of like, I go up 8 notes, come down 8 notes, but then I start at a higher place. Okay, so shift, shift, and then bar 7. Notice I played the D note on the G string's 19th fret, but then I moved it over to the 15th fret on the B string coming down. And then we finish up that first part in bar 8. And then we have the descending 4 bars starting in bar 9. Again, that's so it's either 4 notes or 2 notes per string, and you could try to continue that pattern. I would suggest taking these ideas and transposing them to different keys, and start small. Start with small little patterns, 4-note things, and then see how you can cleverly, find an opening, find a path where using a finger slide where you can just shift up to the next string and then try to increase your range up and down the neck. That's a great way is to try to find little paths, and be creative and experiment, and you have to have like a troubleshooting type of mindset, where you're not just gonna like doggedly try to do something. It's hard, thinking that if you do it enough times, it'll come. That's true to a certain extent with certain things, but I find it's better to, find an alternate way, as long as you get the sound you want, right? That's all that matters. So have fun with the stuff and good luck. See you soon.